Jesus. Song number 607, Sweetly Lord Have We Heard Thee Calling. Song number 607 on the first. Sweetly Lord have we heard Thee calling, come follow me. And we see where Thy footprints falling, lead us to Thee. Footprints of Jesus that make the pathway glow. We will follow the steps of Jesus wherever they go. Though they lead o'er the cold dark mountains, seeking His sheep, or along by Siloam fountain, helping the weak. Footprints of Jesus that make the pathway glow. We will follow the steps of Jesus wherever they go. If they lead through the temple, holy, preaching the word, or in homes of the poor and lowly, serving the Lord. Footprints of Jesus that make the pathway glow. We will follow the steps of Jesus wherever they go. On the last. When at last, when He sees us our journey done, we will rest where the steps of Jesus end at His throne. Footprints of Jesus that make the pathway glow. We will follow the steps of Jesus wherever they go. Good start this evening. Song number 568. Where Could I Go? Song number 568. We'll sing all three verses of Where Could I Go? Song number 568. On the first. Living below in this so simple world, hardly a comfort can afford. Striving alone to face temptation sore, where could I go but to the Lord? Where could I go? Where could I go? Seeking a refuge for my soul, needing a friend to help me in the end. Where could I go but to the Lord? Song number 568 on the second. Neighbors are kind, I love them everyone. We get along in sweet accord. But when my soul needs manna from above, where could I go but to the Lord? Where could I go? Where could I go? Seeking a refuge for my soul. help me in the end. Where could I go but to the Lord? Good start this evening. Brother Jimmy Shoemake, would you open us in prayer, sir? Thank you. You may be seated.
Well, you made it in before the rain, so that's good. I am thankful that you did. Everybody's dry. Glad to see you here tonight. And I don't see any first-time visitors this evening. Is there anyone that needs a bulletin that did not receive one somewhere this morning? All right, don't see any hands. Thank you, gentlemen. You may be seated. Let's look at your prayer list, if you will, and have some additions to put on your list from today and this week. We have prayed for Butch Wilson for at different times and through the years, but if you will, add his name to your list there that you've got, and just you can put a note beside it that hospice has been called in. This is Brother Vic's brother-in-law, and he and his family have been through a lot this past year. That whole family has, and so pray for him and his wife, Lisa, if you will. Also, remember the Robert Tinsley family. This Brother Vic's nephew that passed away this past week. Robert Tinsley family, and remember them in your prayers. Also, continue to remember the Elaine Bratton family, Brother Ron and his family, at the passing away of his mom. And if you don't already have this written down, please make note of it. Miss Elaine's memorial service will be here at church next Saturday at 11 o'clock, and I'm sure the family would appreciate your presence if you're able to be here for the memorial service. That'll be 11 o'clock here next Saturday, and so make note of that. Also, Ron Bowman, if you will put his name on your list. Ron Bowman has some liver issues. Continue to remember Richard Slusher, Shanna's dad, as he has consultation and scheduling of a surgery for the melanoma that they found on him. So pray for him, if you will. Also pray for Jay Garner, that's recovering surgery. And then remember Miss Pat Page. She has a procedure coming up on July the 10th with her heart. She hasn't been here today just because she has not been feeling well at all with the whole process of the sickness and anyways, her doctor was telling her to limit her activity. So pray for Miss Pat. We know her heart. She would rather be here, but definitely needs to take it easy so that she doesn't have to go in for an emergency in between time. So pray for Miss Pat. Also, some praises from today that Ronnie Jordan got to go home, so that is a praise. And Lavelle Clark got to go home as well, and she's recovering still from that fall. And then keep Scott Gilliland in your prayers as he began chemo. When did he begin chemo? Okay, this past Wednesday. Okay. Right. I knew that was coming up, but I didn't know. Okay. So if you would, keep those folks in your prayers, please. All right, that's the updates and additions that I've got for on my list here. I forgot to mention this morning, forgot to put it in the bulletin as well, and did not mean to do either one. But next Sunday evening after church is the ice cream fellowship, and we try to do this every year around the 4th of July, and so next Sunday we'll have the ice cream fellowship. So if you can make homemade ice cream, do it. Make some ice cream. That'd be good, and that will be good, and so that'd be next Sunday night after church. Men, the prayer breakfast is this coming Saturday at 8 o'clock, so make note of that. And there is a sign-up sheet in the back if you would sign up on that sheet. That way we know that you're coming. And then also there is a sheet out there that if you would like one of the t-shirts that we make yearly, then you can sign up out there. There's a picture of it, the front and the back, so that you know what it looks like and the color there. And you can just, if you would like one, I saw several names that was added this morning, then you just need to put what size and how many you need. So if you would help us out with that. All right, ushers, please come ahead if you will. Let's ask God to bless the offering this evening. And as we do, Brother Lynn, would you pray for the offering, please?
You can remain seated. Song number 583, In the Garden. Song number 583 on the first. I come to the garden alone, while the dew is still on the roses, and the voice I hear falling on my ear, the Son of God discloses, and He walks with me, and He talks with me, and He tells me I am His own, and the joy we share as we tarry there, none other has ever known. If you would join us isn't standing there for the second. He speaks in the sound of his voice. 583 on the second. He speaks in the sound of his voice. It's so sweet, the birds hush their singing, and the melody that he gave to me within my heart is ringing. And he walks with me, and he talks with me, and he tells me I am his own. And the joy we share as we tarry there, none other has ever known. I'd stay in the garden with him, though the night around me be falling. But he bids me go through the voice of woe. His voice to me is calling. And he walks with me, and he talks with me, and he tells me I am his own. And the joy we share as we tarry there, none other has ever known. Song number 603 for our last song this evening. He leadeth me. Oh, blessed thought. Song number 603. Sing all 4 verses of song number 603. He leadeth me, oh blessed thought, oh words with heavenly comfort fraught. Whate'er I do, where'er I be, still 'tis God's hand that leadeth me. He leadeth me, he leadeth me, by his own hand he leadeth me. His faithful follower I would be, for by his hand he leadeth me. Sometimes it seems of deepest gloom, sometimes wearied as hours loom. By water still or troubled sea, still 'tis God's hand that leadeth me. He leadeth me, by his own hand he leadeth me. His faithful follower I would be, for by his hand he leadeth me. On the third, Lord, I would clasp thy hand in mine, nor ever murmur nor repine. Content whatever lot I see, 'tis my God that leadeth me. He leadeth me, by his own hand he leadeth me. His faithful follower I would be, for by his hand he leadeth me. On the last, and when my task on earth is done, when by thy grace a victory's won, in death's cold wave I will not flee, still God through Jordan leadeth me. He leadeth me, he leadeth good singing this evening. You may be seated. This time we're going to have a special from the Swains.
I appreciate that special tonight, don't you? If the devil wants to destroy something, it's your home. And really and truly, it doesn't matter what age your home is, he still wants to destroy it. I think it's so sad to hear of divorces at any time along the way, but it is always so sad when I hear of couple that after their children get gone and are out of the house, then they say, well, who are you? I don't know. Who are you? I don't know. Well, let's go. And they go their separate ways, and they've been together for some 25, 30 years, and then the children are gone, and that's the end. And the devil does not give up on trying to break up homes. And so, Brother Lynn, Miss Ellen, thank you for the special. We need to, it should be a refuge. A home should be a refuge. Well, I have asked Brother Cole if he would preach for us tonight. I got a little carried away this morning, I think, and my back was already out, and I really wasn't thinking about it while I was preaching. And I think the Lord gave me cortisone shot in the spine to keep it lubricated while I was preaching. But then when I got done, the body started locking up, and I thought, well, that's not fun. So Brother Cole can move a lot better than I can, and he preaches from the same book, so I'm looking forward to the message tonight. Brother Cole, you come right ahead.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to get to preach. Hate that it took my dad's back going down for me to preach, but all the same, I'm thankful for the opportunity to get to do it. If you'll join me in Genesis 32, Genesis chapter 32, we appreciate all of the prayers and support that all of y'all have given Emma and myself as she was expecting and then had the baby and then on our move over here. So we just want to publicly just thank all of y'all for that, and I really appreciate it. And we're glad to be here. I'm glad to be back. So far she hasn't told me any different, that she's not glad to be here. So far so good. So if you'll join me in Genesis 32, if you have found Genesis 32, if you'll go ahead and stand with me, please, if you're able to. We'll begin in verse number 22 in Genesis 32, verse number 22. It says in verse number 22, "And he rose up that night and took his 2 wives and his 2 women servants," that's a problem right there, "and his 11 sons, and passed over the ford Jabbok. And he took them and sent them over the brook and sent over that he had. And Jacob was left alone, and there wrestled a man with him until the breaking of the day. And when he saw that he prevailed not against him, he touched the hollow of his thigh, and the hollow of Jacob's thigh was out of joint, as he wrestled with him. And he said, Let me go, for the day breaketh. And he said," this is Jacob, "I will not let thee go, except thou bless me. And he said unto him, What is thy name? He said, Jacob. And he said, Thy name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel. For a prince hast thou power with God and with men, and hast prevailed. And Jacob asked him and said, Tell me, I pray thee, thy name. And he said, Wherefore is it that thou dost ask after my name? And he blessed him there. And Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved. And as he passed over Peniel, the sun rose upon him, and he halted upon his thigh." Dear Heavenly Father, we come to you now, and we thank you for the opportunity it is to come into your house this evening, be able to praise you, be able to worship you, and ask that you would be with the message tonight. I believe it's the one that you've given me to preach tonight. I ask that you would enable me both physically and help me, Lord, and let the message come clear and help me not to get in the way in any form or fashion. I ask all these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you. You may be seated. There's been a phrase that has been coined, and many of y'all might have heard it before. Some of y'all maybe not. Pretty common. The best laid plans of mice and men often go awry. The best laid plans of mice and men often go awry, which basically conveys this. We can make plans, and many do, both small and great, but we don't have the guarantee that we will see those plans to their fruition, basically. And I would say that overall, as a society, as just people in general, we like to plan. Does anyone like to plan? Any planners here? Okay. Most of y'all are with me. Okay. I'm a planner by nature. I really like to plan. It's maybe a little too much, maybe a little too nerdy of me, but I really like to plan. I like to write things out. I like to have them on a planner. I like to put them in a physical planner, like the paper, like year at a glance, things like from Staples, where you have like the calendar and you have like the notes beside the calendar, and then the map in the back with the time zones in case you like get lost in the woods with your planner and you can find your way back. I never knew why they put that in there, but it's in there, and we have to live with that. But I like planning, and here at the church, any type of event that we're going to have, they put the event in the phone, so Brother Blake and I can make sure that we're not forgetting anything, and have everything laid out there so we can have it all planned out. And I think I would submit this question or this suggestion that I think the reason that we like to plan so much is because in a certain way it kind of gives us a control of our life. There's a certain measure of control. When you write something down, you give it a date, you give it a name, you give it a time of the day, it kind of gives you a measure of control. Now, obviously, if we're honest with ourselves, we know that has no control over that date and what happens on it. But it gives you a measure of control. We like having control. We like controlling our lives. And our generation today is no different than any other. As long as man has walked the earth, in his fallen state anyway, he loves to control. We love to control our lives. We like to do things when we want them, how we want them, and and where we want them. And today, I believe, even more so maybe even than other times. But we're no different than those who have come before us. And Jacob is no different. Jacob, he is a man who lived most of his life. If you go back in the chapters previous, he's lived most of his life doing what he wants. He's lived most of his life working things out on his own. His name means supplanter, deceiver, trickster. Jacob was one, he liked to call his own shots. He liked to control things. And I will try not to get too deep into the context here, but I know most of us would be aware with Jacob and his life, so we won't get too deep into it. But just to review, it all began, obviously, with Isaac and Rebekah. And Rebekah, she's expecting twins. And she's talking to God, if I'm expecting twins, like what's going on? It seems like they're struggling inside. What's going on here? And that's when she learns there's two nations inside of you. The elder will serve the younger, which today seems weird. It seems a bit strange that the elder would serve the younger, but especially back then, because back then in those times, the elder had everything. The elder was, he was the most important child. He was, in some cases, the favorite. Because through him, from the father to the elder, is what all the blessings would pass. The blessing, the birthright, the whole 9 yards. So God tells, of course, Rebekah, the elder's going to serve the younger. But Isaac and Esau, they grow up. And like I said, not to get too much into the passage, because a lot of us know it here. But obviously, Isaac and Rebekah, their sons grow up. And Isaac, as the Bible describes him, he was a plain man, dwelt in tents. Esau, he's the mighty hunter who is incredibly hairy. And he's out in the field. He's hunting, he comes back. Jacob's making his pottage, as it calls a pot of lentils. And Jacob, this is where the first time that we see Jacob being conniving. First time we see Jacob trying to control things his way. Now, had he been patient, the birthright really was going to be his. He was going to inherit the promises from Abraham to Isaac and then to Jacob, but he sees an opportunity. Because Esau comes back and he's saying, brother, I'm going to die. I'm going to starve to death. Just give me some of your pottage. And Isaac's like, there's an opportunity here. Okay, I'll give you some of my pottage. I'll give you some of those lentils if you give me your birthright. And we know what happens. He gives him the birthright, and Jacob takes the birthright. Years pass. Isaac's getting old, and his eyesight's getting worse. And he says to Esau, go get me some venison. Go kill an animal, get the venison, bring it to me, that savory meat that I love, so I can bless you before I die. So he goes out, he goes hunting, and meantime, Rebekah, his lovely wife, who was just as conniving as her son, it's like, well, your dad here, he's making a mistake. See, he's about to give the blessing to Esau. You need to get the blessing. So they hatch that plan. Isaac goes in, pretends like he's Esau. It's not Isaac. Jacob goes in, pretends like he's Esau, takes the blessing. Esau gets mad, and he's like, okay, after Dad's dead, you're dead next. Like, I'm going to kill you. I'm done with you. You're dead. Rebekah's like, you need to run. He goes and stays with his uncle, Laban, in Padanaram, back in his hometown where his mom is from, where Rebekah is from. And that's where things get even more complicated, because Jacob tries to take even more control, and he makes even a bigger mess of his life. He gets to Padanaram, and he is working for his uncle, Laban. Like, you're kin here. I want you to name your wages, and we'll pay you accordingly, and you can stay here. And he's like, well, I want your daughter Rachel. I want to marry Rachel. And, well, he's like, okay, you can have Rachel. Work 7 years. And he works those 7 years, and he's working hard, and he gets to the wedding day and gets married, and lo and behold, it's not Rachel, it's Leah the next day. And to this day, I don't understand that, but it was Leah. One way or another, it was Leah. And so he's like, okay, you did me dirty, Laban. That's the Carson paraphrased version. But basically, you tricked me. I was supposed to get Rachel. You gave me Leah. And he gives his explanation. And he works another 7 years and marries Rachel. Well, Rachel and Leah, they're both married to Jacob now. Jacob has 2 wives now. And he has children by Leah. Rachel can't have any children. She's barren at the moment. So Rachel then further complicates the situation, gives her handmaid. He has children by her handmaid. Then Leah, not to be outdone, gives Jacob her handmaid. So now, by the time we get to chapter 32 here, Jacob is married to 2 women, has 2 concubines, has 11 sons by 4 different ladies. He has made an absolute mess of his life at this point. So he sends his sons, he sends his children, his wives, Bilhah and Zilpah, his wife's handmaids, over the brook Jabbok. And he's there alone. And I'm sure there's a lot of fear. And we know from the previous verses in the passage that there's a lot of fear. He's sending gift upon gift to his brother Esau, thinking, okay, just don't kill me. I come in peace, I'm your servant. And we know there's a lot of fear going on. And ironically enough, he's been on the run for 20 years now, and now he finds himself at the end of his rope. Jacob, he can't scheme his way out of this one. He can't talk his way out of this one. He's now coming face to face with the person he's been running with, or running from, for 20 years, his older brother Esau. So there he is, by himself, and he's in trouble. So out of nowhere, in the passage, I thought it was interesting. I was remarking to my dad how it was interesting to me how on one verse it says, and Jacob was left alone, and there wrestled a man with him until the breaking of the day. I don't know how the wrestling match started. I don't know if he just came from behind him or what happened. But one moment he's there alone. The next moment he's wrestling. And it says there's a man there. This is my personal opinion from studying the passage. You may disagree with me, and that's totally fine. But from what the passage says, I believe it's Christophany, appearance of the pre-incarnate Christ, just because he says he's seen God face to face, and the fact that he asks him to bless him, and for the fact that he touches his thigh and causes it to be limp like that. But regardless, he's wrestling now. Jacob is wrestling, and obviously, if this is God he's wrestling, obviously, it's not that God can't beat him. The one who created the world, and who can tame the seas, and who can raise the dead, and can wipe out an army with his word, obviously can't struggle in a wrestling match. But it's that he wouldn't. He's teaching Jacob a lesson here. He's teaching him an important lesson. So they wrestle all night long. And the breaking of the day is coming. And God, he tells him to let him go. He tells Jacob, let me go, the day breaketh. And Jacob, he realizes who he's wrestled with at this point. Because you see, Jacob, he's been going this whole time trying to bless himself, trying to help himself, trying to control things himself through the birthright, through the blessing, through his wives and his kids, and even his livestock, which we won't get into, but He's been trying to help himself so hard the entire time of his life. And he realizes the one that can truly bless him, the one that can truly help him, is the one he's been wrestling. Which he's been wrestling, not physically, but his entire life. So he comes to this point, and he's like, I won't let you go, I want you to bless me. And before God blesses Jacob, he does something interesting here. He wants Jacob to acknowledge something here. He's like, I'll read it for you. Verse 27, he said unto him, what is thy name? It's not that God didn't know Jacob's name, obviously. He's wanting Jacob to acknowledge something here. Jacob is the supplanter. He's the deceiver, the trickster, the one who's been conniving his entire life. And he's asking him, what is thy name? Who are you, Jacob? What are you, Jacob? And he said, Jacob, supplanter, deceiver. In verse 28 he says, and he said, thy name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel. That means prince with God. For as a prince hast thou power with God and with men, and hast prevailed. You're not Jacob anymore. You're Israel. You see, God was changing the way Jacob was to identify. He was no longer the supplanter. He was no longer to be that supplanter anymore, but he was going to be one of the patriarchs of his people that he had chosen to bring his son to earth eventually. He was Israel, the one whom the children of Israel would come from. So Jacob, he found restoration and blessing by yielding to God's control. So he's changed by this encounter. He asks him his name, and he doesn't tell him. It's not his to know, not at this point anyway. And he blessed him there. And Jacob, he realizes the gravity of this situation, and he names the place Peniel. For I've seen God face to face, and my life is preserved. And certainly Jacob, if you go on the further chapters, he's not perfect after that. Far from it. But it represents a turning point in his life. From Jacob to Israel. From supplanter to prince with God. It's easy to look at his life, at Jacob's life, and point out the obvious that, like, Jacob, buddy, like, you had this birthright. You had this blessing. You were promised these things, but you chose to get it through your own means. It's like, life would have been so much easier. You were married to Leah. If you had just stayed married to her and not created the whole other situation, things would have been so much easier. And we can look at that and be like, Jacob, like, if you would just yield to God, take your hands off the control, stop trying to connive and stop trying to control, and things would be so much easier. You wouldn't be in such a mess. And Jacob, he did. He made a colossal mess of his life. And God helped him. He gave him grace. And we see him changing. He's not the supplanter anymore, but he's come to this point, though. He didn't have to come to this point, though. But isn't that true that many around us are the same way? You look around the world, and it does not take any amount of deep searching to find that there are those who have made shipwreck of their lives. They've messed up their lives because they have their hands on the control. They have their hands on the wheel, and they want to control their lives. If you go to Home Depot, it's not a plug. I just happen to work there. Certainly not a plug. Definitely not on the corporate level. Especially for what I'm about to say. If you go to Home Depot, you go to the break room. From ceiling to wall, on every single wall, covered in rainbows. Covered in rainbows, covered in pride stuff. And I'm sure there's probably several places where y'all work that it's very similar right now. You go there, it's covered. And it can make you mad. It can make you upset. It can really make you upset. And largely, I would say that's justifiable. Righteous indignation towards the sin of the whole movement. And It's an abomination. It's wrong, it's sinful, no ways about it. But if we obviously condemn the sin, but then we look at the sinner behind that. And we think, how do they get to such a point? How do you make shipwreck your life to that point? How do you mess up that badly? God has given you a life, and which, whether they acknowledge it or not, probably most would not, that's from where their life comes. But God's given you this life, and you've messed it up. You've had your hands on the control, and you've messed it up so badly. And it's not just that. You see drug abuse, people on the streets because they've turned away all of those that can help them, and they've messed their lives up so badly. Or alcohol abuse, or trouble in homes with infidelity and adultery and fornication. And we could go down a whole laundry list for which we don't have time tonight. And it can leave us scratching our heads as to, how did you get into such a mess? And we can say, it would be so simple if you would just accept Christ, give Him the controls, and things would be so much easier. Things would not that life magically becomes better in prosperity gospel and you suddenly have $1 million in the bank, you're driving a Ferrari and you have perfect health, but you could live a blessed life. You don't have to live like that. However, they refuse to do something so simple to us that seems like common sense. Just give God the control. Then why do we so often take control of our lives and act as if the mess we make is any less of an affront to God? You see, we more than anybody have special privilege, not through election, not through merit, but through Christ, that the people that I just mentioned don't have. If you have children in the house, or had children at some point at your house growing up, if you give your child a command to obey, something you have an expectation for them to do, is your expectation higher for your child to obey you and do something, or the random neighbor kid down the street? Well, obviously your child. So then why do we expect at times, we can expect that God would make allowances for His children that He does not make for those that are not even His own? You see, Jacob made mistake after mistake and mess after mess and caused family drama and caused trauma that they never fully worked through down below. And you see, we can't expect a life lived similarly to turn out any different. So what would a life today for us, what would our life look like if we were living like Jacob? Well, number one, you might find yourselves in a lot of problems. And let me clarify. When I say problems, I'm not speaking to trials and tests that come in our lives. Not things that God allows to happen that we have no control over. I'm not speaking to that tonight. I'm speaking of things that we have brought on upon ourselves. Things that we have done or said that we have caused our problems, not things that have happened to us. So just want to clarify that. And say we've caused this problem, we've dug this hole, and it can be tempting at times to not put down the shovel. It can be tempting that instead of turning to God for our problems, we can continue to try to figure it out on our own. That would be someone who's living like a Jacob. You might let sin slip into your life. You see, Jacob did. We see earlier in, I believe it's chapter 30, Laban, he's chasing after them as they're leaving. He goes into Rachel's tent. And what's Rachel sitting on? An idol. She's hiding one of her father's idols that she took. And this is one of Jacob's wives. Jacob, he had allowed idolatry. Whether he was personally practicing it or not, he had allowed idolatry to come into his life. And you see, after all, why not? Because, you see, if you're the one who's calling the shots in your life, then you get to decide what sin and how much of it is acceptable. So, maybe you've become like a Jacob. Maybe you have those pet sins, if you will, that you've just kind of let go. You've had your hand on the controls of your life long enough that it doesn't seem to bother you so much anymore. Say a lustful look here, a mean-spirited comment there. Just small things, right? Just things that aren't that big of a deal. Maybe it's changed your attitude. Maybe it's changed your demeanor. You've become frustrated. Maybe you've become discouraged or depressed or angry because your hands have been on the control so long that you're frustrated because nothing is going the way you want it to go. And the more you try, the more frustrated you become. And it's easy to wonder, just like the people we were just talking about, how did I end up in this mess? How did it come to this point? Where did I go wrong? To which I would ask, who has control? Who has control of your life tonight? And there's multiple ways that God can have control of your life. And I'll just name a few, because we don't have enough time to cover everything, go down the whole gambit of things, because we would be here for a long time. First and foremost, I would say, would be an unpopular topic, something that is especially unpopular among Americans to talk about, would be our money. I would say that is one of the largest things in which we can show who has control of our lives. It's one of the biggest assets we have, one of the things that we can control the most. And it shows us just exactly who's rocking the boat, who's steering the boat. So, if you look at your checkbook, for those who don't have checkbooks, I'm admittedly one of them. But say if you look at your budget, you look at the last month. Who has control? Is it the hobby? Or maybe it could be an activity, or that car, or that house, or whatever it might be. Is it that thing, or is it God? And when I say that thing, it could be a number of list of things, and you might know what it could be. But in reality, whatever it is, it's just you in control, or God. So what would it look like if God had control? Well, number one, obvious to all of us most of us who have been at church most of our lives, obviously tithe. That's bottom, level 0, 101. If he doesn't have control of that, then he doesn't have control whatsoever. Number two would be to what extent does God can have control otherwise? Does he have control in other ways in your finances? When it comes to the Great Commission, I believe that there's two ways to show our support. Number one is the completion of the Great Commission, which would be the actual going and preaching the gospel. And then that also is garnered with our support of those who do. So number one would be money. Money, who has control of your money tonight? It's one of the things that is a great earmark to show you who has control in my life. Another one would be time. The most precious physical commodity that God gives us is time. One of. How do we spend our time? Say if we were to do something similar to your budget, you get time, and you say if you were to budget your time, you look at the beginning of the year. How much would you say God has? Just thinking about it in your own mind. And obviously, for all of us here, we can block off those Sunday mornings, 52 weeks a year. Block that one off, check. And we're here Sunday night, and that's fantastic. But what about Wednesdays? That's another place that God can have control. If a good way of telling would be if the church doors are open and you're physically able, and obviously there's circumstances that you just can't make it, and God understands that. There's circumstances, there's situations, and God understands that. But if you can, then you should. And it shows that God has control of your time. How much time is He getting? When you look at your week, you say, okay, I have work this week, I have church this week, I have that ball game, I have those activities. Which one's optional? When you're making your week, which one takes priority? Will show you which one has control. Say you're thinking another way is to how you treat your family. And in that, I mean, how do you think about that? Are they yours or are they God's? And if you're giving God control, then they're His. They're His to begin with, regardless. It's whether we acknowledge it. And we must give Him the control. We must lay them at His feet. The time, the money, the people, it's all yours, God. It's all yours, because when we take control, we shipwreck our lives. When we live a life that is yielded to God, we can truly have a blessed life. And not a blessed life, but the most blessed life is one, and the only blessed life is the one that is yielded to God. You say, Jacob lived a life of many mistakes and regrets. And like I said earlier, it didn't have to be that way. And for us, it doesn't have to continue that way. If you have your hands on the controls tonight, and you're trying to connive and you're trying to control your life, and say it's your time, say it's your money, say it's something that I haven't even gotten close to mentioning tonight, whatever that is, you can give it to God tonight. Say, I'm done having my hands on the control. I don't want to make a mess of things. I'm giving it to you. Give me the grace, give me the wisdom to know how I should spend my time, how I should spend my money, how I should fill in the blank, and give it to Him. You see, even if we're currently controlling, even if we've made some messes in the past, and you may be sitting here tonight and being like, well, I've already done all of those things. I've already made these messes. I've made these mistakes in my life, and how can I come back from that? Well, you can. The past doesn't have to dictate the future. You can yield to God the control that He so rightly deserves. We as believers can have a blessed life when we yield to God. He will offer restoration and forgiveness to those who will yield to His control. So tonight, we have two decisions to make. We have two decisions tonight. Do we hold on to our lives, our money, our time, our resources, our family, whatever happens to be? Or do we give it to Him? I would suggest tonight, if there's something you're holding on to, give it to God tonight. Say, I'm done controlling my life. I'm done holding on to my money, my time, and it's all about me and what I want to do, and I'm giving it to you. I want to know what you want me to do. You are the one who controls my life from now on. So tonight, you can do that. You can give the controls to God. So what decision will you make tonight? Every head is bowed and every eye is closed. Dear Heavenly Father, I ask that you would please help the message tonight, and please help us all to yield to your control. I know personally in my own life it can be so easy for me to try to take control and try to work things out on my own, and I know that many times I fall short. I ask that you would please help us tonight. If there's any here in the congregation, if they need to yield to you, please let them do so. Please continue to speak to hearts and be with us the rest of this invitation, and please bless it, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen. Tonight we'll be singing 478, Nothing Between.
Nothing between